The desperate call for help, the emergency signal. The massive crystal communication array in the center of the Galactic Council chambers began pulsing with urgent red light. Ambassador Thylex of the Andromedian Collective immediately recognized the emergency frequency. His translucent blue skin darkened with concern as he activated the main viewing screen. The holographic image that appeared made every delegate in the chamber gasp in horror. Commander Skyweaver of the Zephyrian Defense Force appeared on screen, her beautiful feathered wings drooping with exhaustion. The bird-like alien's usually golden plumage was dull and patchy, her large amber eyes filled with desperation. Behind her, the images showed scenes of unthinkable tragedy. Zephyrian cities, once soaring towers of crystal and metal that reached toward the clouds, now stood, empty and silent. Bodies of the winged aliens lay scattered in the streets, their colorful feathers faded to gray. Honored Council, Skyweaver's voice cracked with emotion. The ancient plague has returned to our worlds. 3 of our core planets are dying. Our population has dropped from 40 million to less than 8 million in just 6 months. We need immediate medical assistance, food supplies, and temporary shelter for our survivors. The plague was legendary throughout the galaxy. It had nearly wiped out the Zephyrians 500 years ago, targeting their unique respiratory systems and attacking their ability to fly. What made it worse was that the disease seemed to affect only Zephyrians, making it nearly impossible for other species to study or treat effectively. Ambassador Thylex stood slowly, his 6 arms spreading in a gesture of sympathy. Commander Skyweaver, the Galactic Council acknowledges your request for emergency aid. We will immediately begin discussions on how to assist your people. But even as he spoke, Thylex knew the truth. The Council had been talking about budget cuts for months. The Andromedian Collective was dealing with their own economic problems. The Crystalline Empire was focused on territorial disputes with the Void Runners. Most of the major powers simply did not have the resources to mount a massive relief operation. The Council's debate. The emergency session continued for hours. Representative after representative stood to express sympathy for the Zephyrians, but each found excuses for why their species could not provide significant help. The Tentacled Confederation offered to send some medical supplies, but admitted they knew nothing about treating the ancient plague. The Silicon-based Federation promised food shipments, but warned it would take months to modify their products for Zephyrian biology. Commander Skyweaver listened to each response with growing despair. Her people were dying by the thousands every day, yet they needed help now, not promises of future assistance that might never come. The beautiful flying cities of her homeworld were becoming tomb monuments to a dying civilization. Perhaps, suggested Ambassador Vorthon of the Spiral Arm Alliance, we could establish a relief fund. Each member species could contribute according to their abilities over the next several years. The suggestion was met with polite murmurs of agreement, but Skyweaver knew it was meaningless. Her people would be extinct long before any relief fund could be organized and deployed. The Galactic Council was good at making speeches and signing agreements, but terrible at taking quick action when action was needed most. Just as the session was about to end with nothing but empty promises, the main doors of the chamber opened with a soft hiss. 3 figures in simple gray uniforms walked in, their appearance causing immediate whispers throughout the chamber. Humans were still relatively new to galactic politics, having only made first contact 20 years ago. Most species considered them primitive and barbaric, barely worth attention. The human officer Admiral Sarah Chen walked to the center of the chamber with quiet confidence. She was a small woman compared to most of the alien delegates, but something about her presence commanded attention. Behind her, Dr. Marcus Webb and General Patricia Stone stood silently, their expressions serious but determined. Honored delegates, Admiral Chen began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems. Humanity has been monitoring the situation in the Zephyrian colonies. We know the Council faces difficult decisions about resource allocation and response times. She paused, looking directly at Commander Skyweaver. We also know that the Zephyrian people cannot wait for committees and bureaucracy while their civilization dies. That is why Earth's government has authorized me to make an immediate offer of comprehensive humanitarian assistance. The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew that humans were a young species with limited technology and resources. What could they possibly offer that the great powers of the galaxy could not? Admiral Chen activated a holographic display that showed detailed relief plans. We can have medical teams, food supplies, and temporary shelter materials at the Zephyrian worlds within 72 hours. Our ships are already being loaded with emergency supplies. We have doctors who have been studying the ancient plague for months and believe we can at least slow its progress while we develop treatments. Commander Skyweaver stared at the display with growing hope. The human plan was more comprehensive than anything the Council had discussed. They were offering immediate deployment of mobile hospitals, atmospheric processors to clean infected air, and even temporary housing for millions of refugees. "This is very generous," said Ambassador Thylax, carefully, "but surely such an operation would strain human resources beyond their capabilities." Admiral Chen smiled slightly. Humanity has always believed that when people are suffering, resource calculations become secondary to moral obligations. We will find a way to make it work. What she did not mention was that the human government had been planning this intervention for months. Earth's intelligence services had been monitoring the plague's progress and had already identified the Zephyrian worlds as containing some of the most valuable quantum minerals in the galaxy. The suffering was real and the human desire to help was genuine, but there were other factors at play. The secret meeting. After the council session ended with unanimous approval for the human relief mission, Admiral Chen, Dr. Webb, and General Stone met in a private conference room aboard their diplomatic ship. The official records would show they spent the time coordinating relief efforts, but the reality was quite different. "Phase 1 is approved," Admiral Chen said, activating a secure communication link to Earth. "The Zephyrians are desperate enough to accept unlimited human presence on their worlds. The Council species are too focused on their own problems to pay close attention to our operations." Dr. Webb pulled up classified files on Zephyrian biology and technology. "Our xenobiology teams have been studying the plague samples we acquired through unofficial channels. We can cure it, but that's not the point. The longer we take to develop treatments, the more dependent they become on our support." General Stone reviewed military deployment schedules. "The relief fleet includes 50,000 medical and support personnel. What the manifest doesn't show is that 30,000 of them are special forces operators trained in cultural infiltration and infrastructure control. They'll establish what look like temporary medical facilities but are actually permanent forward bases. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Humans would arrive as saviors, providing genuine relief to the suffering Zephyrians. But while they were saving lives and rebuilding communities, they would also be establishing permanent control over the most strategically valuable worlds in the sector. The Zephyrians would be so grateful for human help that they would never question the gradual transition from temporary assistance to permanent administration. "What about the quantum mineral deposits?" Admiral Chen asked. "Our geological teams are already analyzing the data," Dr. Webb replied. "The Zephyrian worlds contain enough quantum crystals to power human expansion for the next 1,000 years. The aliens have been mining them for centuries, but never realized their true value for faster-than-light travel." Admiral Chen nodded with satisfaction. "Remember, everything we do must be genuinely helpful to the Zephyrians. We're not conquerors, we're liberators. The fact that liberation serves our strategic interests is just a happy coincidence." The fleet arrives. 72 hours later, the largest humanitarian fleet in galactic history emerged from hyperspace above the Zephyrian homeworld of Ethros. 200 human ships filled the sky, their hulls gleaming white with red medical crosses and humanitarian symbols. To the dying Zephyrians watching from the surface, they looked like angels descending from heaven. Commander Skyweaver stood on the landing platform of the capital city, her wings trembling with emotion as the first human transport ships touched down. The city around her was eerily quiet, where once millions of Zephyrians had filled the air. With their songs and the flutter of wings, now only a few thousand survivors remained, too weak to fly. Admiral Chen was among the first humans to disembark, carrying a medical scanner and wearing the simple uniform of a relief worker. She approached Commander Skyweaver with genuine concern in her eyes. "Commander, I'm Admiral Chen. We're here to help your people survive this crisis. Our medical teams are already setting up emergency treatment centers, and we have enough supplies to support your entire surviving population." Commander Skyweaver fell to her knees, her wings spread in the traditional Zephyrian gesture of ultimate gratitude. "Admiral Chen, you have given us hope when we had none." The children were starting to forget the sound of laughter. "Your arrival means life for our species." As human medical teams rushed to establish treatment centers, other specialists were quietly beginning their secondary missions. Dr. Webb's team set up what appeared to be a temporary research laboratory to study the plague, but they were actually conducting comprehensive scans of the planet's mineral deposits. General Stone's security personnel took positions around the relief camps, ostensibly to protect the aid workers, but actually to identify and monitor potential resistance leaders among the Zephyrian population. The human plan was working perfectly. The Zephyrians were so grateful for immediate relief that they welcomed unlimited human presence on their worlds. They provided detailed information about their society, their resources, and their defensive capabilities, thinking they were helping their saviors understand how to help them better. Building trust within 2 weeks, the human relief operation had expanded to cover all 3 affected Zephyrian worlds. Mobile hospitals treated thousands of plague victims daily. Atmospheric processors cleaned the air in major cities. Temporary housing camps provided shelter for millions of refugees. The Zephyrians watched in amazement as their worlds began to heal under human care. But the humans were doing more than providing medical aid. They were studying every aspect of Zephyrian society, technology, and infrastructure. Teams of anthropologists disguised as social workers mapped population centers and identified key cultural leaders. Engineers building temporary shelters were actually surveying optimal locations for permanent military bases. Communications specialists setting up emergency networks were installing systems that would allow humans to monitor all Zephyrian communications. Dr. Webb made a breakthrough in treating the ancient plague, but instead of immediately releasing the cure, he recommended a gradual treatment program that would require ongoing human medical supervision. "If we cure them too quickly," he explained to Admiral Chen, "they might not feel the need for permanent human presence. Better to make them dependent on our continued support." The Zephyrians never suspected that their salvation was also their surrender. They saw humans as miracle workers who had appeared in their darkest hour. The idea that these selfless helpers might have their own agenda never occurred to them. They were too grateful and too desperate to question the motives of the species that was saving their lives. As the first month of the relief operation ended, Admiral Chen reviewed the progress reports with satisfaction. The Zephyrians were recovering, the quantum mineral surveys were complete, and human personnel were established in positions of authority throughout Zephyrian society. Phase 1 was complete, and Phase 2 was about to begin. The galaxy thought it was watching a humanitarian mission, but in reality, it was witnessing the birth of the first human colony outside the solar system. The Zephyrians would live, but they would live under human rule, grateful for the privilege of serving their saviors. The perfect takeover, the transformation, begins. 6 months after the first human ships arrived, the Zephyrian worlds were unrecognizable. What had once been dying planets covered in plague victims and empty cities had become thriving centers of activity. The human relief operation had evolved into something much more permanent, though few Zephyrians realized the true nature of the transformation taking place around them. Admiral Chen stood in her office aboard the orbital station that humans had built temporarily to coordinate relief efforts. Through the viewport, she could see the 3 Zephyrian worlds spinning below, their surfaces now dotted with human installations. The mobile hospitals had been replaced by permanent medical complexes. The refugee camps had become planned communities, with human-designed infrastructure. The emergency communication networks had evolved into a comprehensive surveillance system that monitored every aspect of Zephyrian society. Status report, Admiral Chen requested from her deputy, Colonel Maria Santos, who had officially been transferred to the relief mission but was actually running intelligence operations. Colonel Santos activated a holographic display showing the 3 worlds. All primary objectives are achieved, Admiral. We have permanent installations on every major continent, full access to the quantum mineral deposits, and effective control over Zephyrian communications and transportation networks. The transformation had been gradual and carefully managed. Each step was presented to the Zephyrians as a natural evolution of the relief effort. Temporary medical facilities needed to become permanent to ensure continued treatment of plague survivors. Emergency housing had to be upgraded to provide better living conditions. Communication systems required enhancement to coordinate ongoing support efforts. What about resistance? Admiral Chen asked. Minimal and decreasing, Colonel Santos replied. Most Zephyrians are genuinely grateful for our help. The few who have raised questions about the permanent nature of our presence have been redirected, eliminating opposition. The human approach to dealing with potential resistance was subtle, but effective. They did not use violence or obvious intimidation. Instead, they identified Zephyrian leaders who might eventually challenge human control and found ways to neutralize them through apparently natural means. Commander Skyweaver had been one of the first targets. As the highest-ranking Zephyrian military officer and a natural leader, she represented the greatest potential threat to human plans. But rather than eliminate her, the humans had co-opted her. They provided her with advanced medical treatment for injuries she had sustained during the plague crisis, then offered her a position as liaison between human relief efforts and Zephyrian survivors. Commander Skyweaver is now effectively working for us, Colonel Santos explained. She believes she's helping her people by facilitating human aid, but she's actually legitimizing our permanent presence. Her endorsement carries enormous weight. With other Zephyrians, other potential resistance leaders had been dealt with more directly. Dr. Windcaller, a prominent Zephyrian scientist who had begun questioning human research methods, had suffered a tragic accident while investigating one of the human research facilities. Scholar Stormfeather, who had been documenting concerning changes in Zephyrian society, had been offered a prestigious position studying ancient Zephyrian culture in human universities, effectively removing him from his homeworld and isolating him from potential followers. The beauty of our approach, Admiral Chen noted, is that we're not creating martyrs. We're either converting potential opponents or removing them in ways that appear to be natural consequences of their own choices. Economic integration. While the political and military aspects of the takeover proceeded smoothly, the economic integration of the Zephyrian worlds was perhaps the most crucial element of human strategy. The humans had introduced advanced technologies and economic systems that made the Zephyrians increasingly dependent on human support. Dr. Webb's medical research teams had developed treatments for the ancient plague that required ongoing human medical supervision. Zephyrian biology was complex, and the human treatments needed regular adjustment and monitoring that only human doctors could provide. This created a permanent need for human medical personnel on every Zephyrian world. The medical dependency is working perfectly, Dr. Webb reported during a secure briefing. We've convinced the Zephyrians that without ongoing human medical support, the plague could return at any time. They're actually requesting that we establish permanent medical facilities. The economic integration went far beyond medicine. Human engineers had rebuilt Zephyrian infrastructure using human technology and standards. The new transportation systems, communication networks, and power grids all required human maintenance and expertise. Zephyrian workers were being trained to operate human equipment, but the advanced systems were designed to require human oversight and authorization. We've made ourselves indispensable, explained Chief Engineer Patricia Morrison. The Zephyrians now depend on us for every aspect of their modern life. If we withdrew our support, their society would collapse within months. The quantum mineral extraction operations were particularly important. The humans had convinced the Zephyrians that modern mining techniques would allow them to extract resources more efficiently while minimizing environmental damage. In reality, the human mining operations were removing quantum crystals at unprecedented rates, shipping them to human worlds for processing and use in human faster-than-light drives. Cultural manipulation. Perhaps the most insidious aspect of the human takeover was the gradual transformation of Zephyrian culture itself. Human educators and social workers had established programs to help Zephyrian children recover from the trauma of the plague crisis. These programs included human language instruction, human historical studies, and human cultural values. The children are the key to long-term success, explained Dr. Elizabeth Harper, the chief of human cultural integration efforts. The adult Zephyrians will always remember their pre-contact civilization, but the children are growing up in a world where human presence is normal and beneficial. Human educational programs emphasize the importance of cooperation, efficiency, and technological progress, values that aligned with human interests but were subtly different from traditional Zephyrian culture. The bird-like aliens had historically valued individual freedom, artistic expression, and harmony with nature. The new generation was being taught to value collective security, practical achievement, and technological advancement. The humans were also introducing new economic concepts that transformed Zephyrian society. Traditional Zephyrian communities had been based on extended family groups and resource sharing. The humans introduced concepts of individual property ownership, wage labor, and competitive markets that gradually broke down traditional social structures. "We're not destroying their culture," Dr. Harper insisted. "We're helping it evolve to meet the challenges of the modern galaxy. The Zephyrians are becoming more prosperous and more secure than they ever were under their old systems." The Galactic Council awakens. Back on the Galactic Council homeworld, some delegates were beginning to notice disturbing patterns in reports from the Zephyrian sector. Ambassador Thylex had been monitoring the human relief mission and was growing increasingly concerned about what he was seeing. The human presence in the Zephyrian worlds has become far more extensive than originally authorized. Thylex reported to a closed session of the Council's Security Committee. What began as a temporary humanitarian mission has evolved into what appears to be a permanent occupation. The evidence was subtle but compelling. Satellite imagery showed that human installations in the Zephyrian worlds had grown far beyond what would be needed for medical relief. Communication intercepts suggested that humans were making long-term plans for resource extraction and infrastructure development. Most troubling, Zephyrian communications with the outside galaxy had declined dramatically, with most external contact now being handled through human intermediaries. "Are you suggesting that the humans have somehow conquered the Zephyrian worlds?" asked Representative Quantum of the Silicon-based Federation. "I'm suggesting that the line between humanitarian aid and imperial control has been deliberately blurred," Thylex replied. "The humans have created a situation where the Zephyrians are completely dependent on their continued presence, while simultaneously establishing military and economic control over some of the most valuable worlds in the sector." The Council's investigation revealed the scope of human activities in the Zephyrian worlds. Human personnel now numbered over 200,000 across the 3 planets. Human installations included not just medical facilities but also manufacturing centers, research laboratories, mining operations, and communication networks. Most significantly, the humans had established orbital defense platforms that gave them effective military control over the entire system. "The humans have built an empire," Thylex concluded, "and they've done it while convincing everyone, including their subjects, that they're providing humanitarian assistance." The perfect crime. When the Galactic Council finally confronted Admiral Chen about the true nature of human activities in the Zephyrian worlds, her response was masterful in its simplicity. "Every action we have taken has been requested by the Zephyrian people themselves," Admiral Chen explained to the Emergency Council session. "We came to provide humanitarian aid, and we have succeeded beyond our wildest expectations. The plague has been eliminated, the Zephyrian population is recovering, and their worlds are more prosperous than ever before." She activated a holographic display showing comparative statistics. Zephyrian population numbers were indeed recovering. Medical facilities were treating not just plague survivors, but providing comprehensive health care to the entire population. Educational programs were producing a generation of Zephyrians with advanced technical skills. Economic productivity was at historical highs. The Zephyrians have voted repeatedly to request continued human presence and support, Admiral Chen continued. They have invited us to establish permanent facilities and have welcomed human participation in their governance and economic systems. Are you suggesting that the Council should overrule the democratically expressed wishes of the Zephyrian people? It was a perfect trap. The humans had indeed secured Zephyrian consent for every major expansion of their presence. They had done so through a combination of genuine benefits, careful manipulation, and elimination of opposition. But the consent was technically legitimate. The Zephyrians had voted to accept permanent human presence because they genuinely believed it was in their best interests. The Zephyrians are not free to make independent choices, Ambassador Thylex argued. They have been made completely dependent on human support. Their consent is meaningless because withdrawal of that consent would mean the collapse of their civilization. That is not our fault, Admiral Chen replied smoothly. We did not create the plague crisis that devastated their worlds. We responded to their call for help and provided assistance more comprehensive than any other species was willing or able to provide. If our aid has been so successful that they now depend on our continued cooperation, that speaks to the effectiveness of our efforts, not to any malicious intent. The new reality, as the Council debate continued, the reality of the situation became clear. The humans had indeed taken control of the Zephyrian worlds, but they had done so in a way that made resistance impossible. The Zephyrians were better fed, healthier, and more prosperous than they had been in centuries. Their children were receiving better education, their technology was advancing rapidly, and their future looked brighter than ever. The price of these improvements was their independence, but most Zephyrians considered it a fair trade. They had been a dying civilization when the humans arrived. Now they were a thriving colony of a rapidly expanding human empire. From their perspective, the humans had not conquered them, they had saved them. The most disturbing aspect of this situation, Thylex reported to his government, is not that the humans have built an empire through deception, it's that their methods actually work. The Zephyrians are genuinely better off under human rule than they were as an independent species. The implications for the galaxy were staggering. If the human model of humanitarian conquest proved successful, it could be replicated throughout the galaxy. Any species facing a crisis, economic, environmental, or social, might find themselves receiving generous human assistance that gradually transformed into permanent human control. We have witnessed the birth of a new form of imperialism, Thylex concluded in his final report. The humans have proven that conquest through compassion is more effective than conquest through force. They have created willing subjects who are grateful for their subjugation. The Zephyrian worlds were now officially human protectorates, their inhabitants living as citizens of an empire they had voted to join. The galaxy had learned a new lesson about the species from Earth. Humans were not just skilled warriors or clever diplomats, but masters of the most subtle and effective form of conquest ever devised. The age of human expansion had begun, and no species in the galaxy was prepared for the challenges it would bring.